comfort, that death of greatness. Why do more when you've already done it all? Faker hadn't just won Worlds once, not even twice. He had won it 4 times, the most recent of which was 7 years after his last. By 2024, Faker had nothing to prove. He could have just set up his keyboard and retired, not just a legend, but the legend. But Faker chose not to settle for this. He chose to try again for his 5th Worlds win, and it seems like he made a horrible decision. 2024 was one of T1's worst years for a number of reasons. They were under constant DDoS attacks, and they were barely able to train. They even dropped down to the lower bracket during the spring LCK season because of this. He came into the season barely able to keep his head above the water. He was losing to all the people he was supposed to dominate, and it would have been fair to say that he was champion in name alone. Yet, despite this, he chose to make the arduous journey to the world stage again. If they planned to make it to Worlds, T1 would first have to qualify, and considering that they'd been unable to practice all season, that would prove difficult. Faker managed to win a 2-1 victory over Nongshim Red Force, but this dominance would fall apart when they ran into their longtime rivals, Gen G. Faker had to face down the team that dominated the LCK and had become the kings of the very region Faker once dominated. They tried their best to hold out, but ultimately, all they could do was lose once again to the new giants. Faker would have to leave the Rift once again, knowing that Chovy was the better player. But despite Chovy's skill and Gen G's general dominance, it was clear that their inability to practice greatly impacted their performance. T1's ADC, Gumayusi, even mentioned that due to the lack of practice, they weren't able to adapt to the new meta. So they would go on to win D+ KIA and Kwangdong Freaks, but lose to DRX and again to KT Rolster. After a short break from the LCK and winning the Esports World Cup, T1 and Faker were ready to bring that dominance back to the domestic scene, but the magic seemed to not follow them on the plane ride back to Korea. Faker wouldn't just lose to top-tier teams like Hanwha Life and Gen G, but would also lose to teams that, frankly, I had never even heard of, like Fear X and even Nongshim Red Force, the very team T1 had beat at the start of the tournament. Their performance was so bad that after a devastating loss against Gen G, Faker broke down. The former champion could see that he'd really lost it all. This wasn't just any loss, but a loss where Faker actually made mistakes. One such example was when Faker, the mechanical goat, missed a quirky Valkyrie over a wall. Like, this is Faker we're talking about. The same Faker who did this just last season.
Area though, it's so hard for Weibo to walk up because Keria is on that sideline. They know he's there.
Yeah, he flashes in. He finds himself the charm on DeForest. There is the ultimate from the Shy, but it just doesn't quite do enough. They try and get out, but Faker has the perfect execution and locks down his fellow ninja. Xiaohu now taking a whole lot of damage, and Faker is in the shroud. He's toying with him. It's a double kill. What? Order! And back in again. It's a triple for Faker. Zeus is going to be able to help lock down the next one. Faker eventually goes down, but it's 4 for him and Carrier.
He would continue to be picked off during the game and play a large part in why his team lost to Gen G. Yet despite all of this, T1 managed to get to the summer playoffs. Faker might have been miles behind, but he was still one step closer to Worlds. Then he lost it all. He lost to Hanwha Life, which dropped them into the lower bracket, where they would manage to defeat D+ KIA, but lose again to Hanwha Life in the bracket finals. Yet despite all of this, they were able to clutch a close 3-2 win against KT Rolster and become the LCK's 4th seed for Worlds. Also, a quick reminder, if you're enjoying this, don't forget to like and subscribe. It does a lot for the channel. Thank you. So, Faker, the world champion, managed to scrape by and enter in the lowest possible position. He barely qualified for the very same tournament he once dominated. Their first game in Worlds would be against Top Esports, but despite Zeus clutching first blood and some amazing engages from Faker, T1 would eventually lose the game and to TES. This wasn't a good look for the reigning champions. They would go on to win 3 games in the Swiss stage and move on, but the nerves never really settled for T1 fans or for Faker. But fate wasn't about to let Faker get off that easily. He would face off against Top Esports again in the quarterfinals. He would either redeem himself or lose it all here and now. And redeem himself he did. Faker gets an early lead for his team in Game 1 by getting first blood on Tian, and a series of decisive teamfights snowballed them into victory in Game 1. And though Faker obviously still had his eyes on the prize, this was the first time we actually felt like T1 might be in fighting shape. After a whole year of loss after loss, disappointment after disappointment, it seemed like Faker was back to being who he was always meant to be, the champion. Faker and T1 continued this dominance through all 3 games and clutch a flawless victory in the quarterfinals. But if Faker would want to lift the Summoners Cup, he would have to defeat the team that had taken their title as the best in the LCK, Gen G. Faker would have to go against the single most dominant mid laner in all of LoL, and the mid laner he could never defeat. Gen G asserted their dominance early in Game 1. Chovy took first blood, and eventually Gen G pulled into both an early gold lead and a kill lead. But T1 wasn't about to make it easy for them. Sure, they hadn't been in their best form this season, and sure, they had never really won against Gen G, but they were the champions, and Faker was the greatest. After taking Baron and demolishing Gen G in a teamfight, T1 was able to equalize the kills and even edge out a gold lead. After that, the game was all about T1 and their captain, Faker. After a decisive ace, T1 closes the first game in the series, and has transformed from a team that could barely keep their head above water to one that seems built to dominate the world's stage. But what even really changed here? Despite dropping a game against Gen G in the series, the only word you could use to describe T1 and Faker's performance was world-class. But why was this? What changed? Well, it was simple. Like Faker said earlier, T1 wasn't up to form before because they weren't able to adequately practice till that point. The team that scraped through the LCK to be the 4th seed wasn't really T1 in their truest form. This was. And it was against Chovy, Faker's nemesis, that he would prove not just that he was still the best, but also show the difference between being a skilled player and leading a team to victory. In the final game of the series, Faker is caught out by a Poppy, stunning him against the wall. He was in a situation almost identical to that of his devastating loss in 2017. If you've watched my other videos on Faker, you would know just how devastating that was for his career. But in that match against Samsung Galaxy, he was caught out by a flash ult from Varus. It was this same position against the same team because Gen G was just a rebranded Samsung Galaxy. But this time, Faker wouldn't lose. In fact, he would win and triumph over his rivals in what would be the most watched finals game in League of Legends history. But that would only take them to the next stage, to face another team that T1 and Faker had seemed unable to do anything against, BLG. Going into the finals, BLG had never lost a best of 5s to T1, and they had all the intention to keep that streak going strong. After all, despite their surprising dominance against Gen G, this was still Faker's worst year, pretty much ever. If BLG could beat him at his best, they sure as hell didn't plan to lose at his worst. These games and this final would become the most watched game in esports history, and honestly, it should have been nothing less. It was the final showdown between the most dominant team in the LLP and the has-beens that managed to rise out of their graves like Lazarus and claw their way to the finals. In Game 1, BLG seemed to want to quiet the murmurs of their doubters as early as possible by getting first blood on Guma in just under a minute. BLG would maintain this lead all through the first game until a teamfight leaves T1 watching their hopes of victory in the first game slip through their hands.
To collapse. Already they've locked up T1 in the middle of the meat grinder, and one has gone down. Zeus falls. Baker getting chased out as well, and Bin's flashing forward. Baker will manage to dash across towards the red pit, but Gumayushi does not have that same luxury. BLG find 3, all of them sitting on Elk.
A triple kill for the AD carry of BLG.
BLG closed out the game with a double-digit kill lead and an 8k gold lead. It wasn't looking good for T1, and definitely not looking good for Faker. Game 2 started, and BLG got another first blood against Gumayusi. This set the precedent that this would be another easy win for BLG. They caught Guma in the same place they did in the previous game, in the same place too. It looked as if the series would be a swift victory for BLG, but T1 was able to gain the lead back. Then they won the match and equalized the score. T1 would close out the game with 15 more kills and a 15k gold lead, dominating BLG in the same manner that they were dominated before. Game 3 would come around and T1 would again give BLG first blood, and at this point, it was clear that this trend was here to stay. But unlike the last game, T1 would not recover from this. They would continue to lose more and more kills to BLG until they lost the game as a whole.
As well, the cease and desist. Silence Ultimate stolen away. A hero's entrance is followed by a second, but it looks like Faker's more like Icarus than any hero taking to the skies. Knight pumps a stopwatch. T1 go pop. Zeus locked up towards the top side. Already 4 for 0 for BLG. As they are looking to take us to match.
It would be another dominant win for BLG with an insane gold lead and an almost cartoonish kill lead. This meant that Faker and T1 had their hopes hanging by a thread. If BLG clutched one more victory, then it was over for them. They couldn't let that happen. However, BLG wasn't planning to make it easy for them to fight back. They get first blood yet again by diving Zeus under his turret and get another kill on him the exact same way not too long after. Twice. It wasn't looking good for T1 again. They were down in what might have been their final game in World, but Faker proved to everyone once again why he was the GOAT.
With the equalizer, you have Faker jumping in with the abscond that duck just like this. Elk doesn't sidestep. Faker dashing forward for a little bit more damage, using that passive to its full effect. Steals away the Mega Inferno Bomb. Elk has to flash it. Faker takes the tower, and Elk just...
Arrow goes wide, but Faker's still here.
Faker looking for that flank, will steal away the quickness from on guest. Charm flashes in, binds 2, equalizer in the back line as well. As Faker is not of this earth, he finds the engage, he finds everything. T1 were looking. Faker's taken out the tier 2 in the top lane. Shun goes in with the Glacial Prism on there with the follow-up. Carrier though, an incredible hostile takeover puts on in his place. Owner tanking the tower, Glacial Prism stolen away by Faker as he dives onto the back line. Who else but Faker again? In the end he falls, but Guma is making Shun look like a pin cushion. Knight forced to flash away. Elk trying to put the damage down as well. He won't land it on Carrier. The fancy feeder out in force as T1 begin to push up.
These plays by Faker, paired with T1's ability to secure objectives throughout the game, allowed them to edge out a victory and reach match point. T1 now sat at the final game in the final series in a tournament that nobody even thought they would qualify for. BLG would take the first blood again this game, but this time it would be on Faker himself. The game would then go back and forth, but both teams seemed perfectly matched in the early to mid game. That was until the team fight that T1 should have lost.
Hoarded you through thick and thin. And
Owner, very close here.
pressure on you, Shadowing Strike going wide. Shun tries to dash across the wall, but immediately he's locked up, goes in with the Cataclysm. Gumayushi pops the Feather Storm. Owner looking to re-engage onto Shun down to half HP. Ben gets onto the back line. Gumayushi cleanses away, but Ben has already put him in the dirt. Kevy is next up. BLG find 2. T1 able to back away for the moment, but the TP behind by Ben as he looks for a little bit more.
Oh, they go back in.
Faker flashes in, and down goes Knight once again when you need someone, when you need anyone to stand up and show just what this game's all about. It's Faker. He finds another.
T1 was in a 3v4, and when every bone and iota of reason would have told you to retreat, Faker engaged and won the fight for his whole team. This was the first real lead anyone had in the entire game, and T1 used it well, securing Baron. BLG tried to take back the lead when they caught Zeus out, but Faker once again proved that it was in the toughest situations that he shined.
Strike, wait a second, topside, Zeus under fire!
Zeus caught out, killer instinct in by Elk. BLG collapsing, 4 members strong, the hero's entrance.
Oh, Zeus!
Faker joins the fight. Elk with the stopwatch, Faker in the middle of them all, and it seems like death may have arrived, and his name is Faker. He's here for your lives. The rest of T1 begin his collapse. Faker's gonna fall as he pops the stopwatch, manages to buy himself a second. Owner here to save his mid laner once again, and Faker still stands. He has ascended. He stands above it all, and he looks hungrily.
This display of brilliance closed out the game, and after a long and arduous journey, Faker finally did what no one thought he could and defended his title.